this. There you go. And so I'm going to open us in prayer, if that's all right. And then I'm going to let Adrian introduce our guest tonight for Artscape to Heartscape, and we'll get started with our conversation. So let's pray. Lord, thank you for this evening time where we are getting ready to step out of one week and step into another, just at this place as well, where we've stepped into another month. I thank you for the gift of beginning in rest. I pray that this would be a restful time of worship, a restful time of conversation, where we come together as creatives and as followers of you who have dedicated all of ourselves and all of our creative life to you. I pray, Lord, that this time, this conversation would be received by you as an offering and that it would bless you. I pray that it would bless Adrian as he shares about his work and his life. And I pray the conversation would bless us as well, encourage us, challenge us, surprise us, and stir us forward to be more reflective of you in our lives and work, but also to deeply, deeply integrate who you are in our lives so that shows up in whatever we do. So I offer this time to you, Lord, and we thank you for the gifts you have given us and your love. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you, Lisa. And thank you, Adrian, for joining us. It's so fun for me to be able to have this opportunity to speak to another Adrian. I love it. So thank you for joining us. I always tell our Convergence community, first of all, I love bringing new artists to the Convergence community. And I love to bring the Convergence community to new artists. And so thank you so much for your willingness to come and spend this time with us today. Adrian is from, you're in Lawrence, Massachusetts now, right? Right outside of Boston, is it?
Yes.
Yes. And so we have a mutual friend. And so I was just, when I saw his work, I was like, yeah, I would love to have Adrian come to Artscape to Heartscape. And so give us a little bit of background. I'd love to know when you knew that you had it.
Had it. So
It,
which it are we referring to here?
this wonderful gift of being a creative in the arts, visual
Yeah.
arts.
Yeah, having a gift. I mean, I think that can work out on a number of different levels. On the broader level, like in the scope of community, I think I started to think about what I did naturally as a gift, probably through what other people were saying.
Yeah.
Like when the people around you start saying, are you an artist or you are an artist, whatever you think about yourself or what you do at that point, you kind of take that on as, the community is sometimes, what the community says about you shouldn't be super important. But at other times and in specific community, I think, like family kind of community, that can be really impactful. So yeah, I would say kind of a community acknowledgement of that. And for me, I mean, that started with my parents, their support. They're recognizing, oh, this is something Adrian really likes to do, and this is something we're really going to support and get behind. So I think that was probably one aspect of it. Having the community around say, this is a gift, and we're willing to invest in your gift, or we're willing to see how you develop that. that, you know, that kind of works on one level, I think, but there is maybe a deeper level, kind of the personal investment of it, where you realize either I need to do this or I need to do something else.
Mm,
That's a point where I think, you know, as an individual, I needed each day to say, oh, this is a gift. I'm an artist. I'm going to do this. And that's something that was kind of always going on in my life since I was very young.
mm,
But, you know, as you go, you know, you make decisions season after season. And at a point, it's like something you need to remind yourself of. You know, you get up in the morning, you're like, this is what you need to do today. And that really becomes, I think, real when it gets to the point of you creating space and you
mm.
creating time
Right.
yourself to do that. Because, you know, everybody has 24 hours a day. Um, Most people have to sleep for a third or a half of that. And then the rest of the time, we need to figure out, like, what frame am I going to build for what I'm going to do?
Right.
And kind of recognizing that I had it, you know, that thing was a communal thing. It was a personal acknowledgement day by day. You know, you wake up and I'm an artist, this is what I do. But then it was another step of really committing to it, saying, I'm going to build this time, I'm going to build this space, and I'm going to fill it with this gift or whatever comes out of this gift.
Right.
And you know, there are fruitful times of that, and there are um, times that you feel like, boy, there's no fruit coming out of this at all. And
Mm,
the kind of the meager seasons. But over the long run, you realize, looking back, perhaps, was this a gift? Was the community right? Was I right in, you know, committing this time to it? Um, and that's, you know, it's not done. I'm still part way in that. Perhaps, you know, when we get to the very end of the race, somehow,
yeah.
that's what decides, did you have the gift or not?
Right.
What did you do with it? You
Oh,
know,
what did you do with it?
yeah, um, you know, by seeing the whole trajectory. So I don't know if there's a specific when to that.
No, I think you know what the thing that I when you were saying the need, it's like when you for you you realized that there was a need also, and
Mm,
and you needed to do something,
mm,
you know.
yeah.
So I hear you with that, and I think that's very important. S- do you is that need still a part like of your everyday like if you don't do it, if you don't do art, do you feel that need?
Yeah. Do you mean if I'm not making art, do I
Not
feel
per
the
se,
need to make it?
if you're not making if you're not doing the creative parts of what you do, if
Yeah.
you weren't doing that.
Yeah. I mean, we any one of us, whether or not we have you know, whatever we consider ourselves to be, an artist or otherwise, we're all creatives. We all create with our time. Um, and so we're always producing something. For me, I've noticed definitely that when I am in just over the scope of a day, um, I'm always creating in my head. I'm always creating out of something deeper. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, lower than on a deeper level than just my whatever's in my head. But when when I'm actually using my hands to convert that into something physical,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be a drawing or a painting, um, or something else. Just like when my hands are busy creating something, um, that's when the need takes on a different form.
Mm.
It's that's kind of where time evaporates.
Yep.
That's where work kind of intersects with rest. And you find that kind of place where, I don't know, some people call it the zone, or that creative place where you don't quite know what's going to happen, but you do in another sense. Um, yeah, so I mean, the need is there when I'm not doing that. It doesn't mean I'm not creating, but the need is definitely there. But when there is actual like activity in making something, uh, the need transforms to be, it's an embodiment. You become a part of somehow what you're making,
Right.
but also disengaged from it in another way. There's some kind of a transformation that happens. And so the need is kind of, it's not internalized. It's outside of you at that point. It's somewhere in between what you're doing and what's going on in the artwork,
I get it.
which is, yeah, it's a wonderful thing.
It really is.
Yeah.
So tell us, what are you working on? What are some of the things you're working on now?
Well, talking about need, I need to work on a lot of different things at the same time. Um, so the pieces I sent you, I'm working on those. Those are all in process and have been in process. I'm also I've got a series of oil paintings that I'm working on. I'm also studying. I've taken on a color study, um, just learning about the theory and chemistry of color and how to use it, or what are ways to use colors. So I'm doing a series of kind of color-based still lifes that are under instruction. And yeah, and I'm dreaming up some other things. I'm working on some landscapes, which are kind of abstracted landscapes. And then I've got a whole bunch of other projects that are kind of in the periphery that I'm working on.
So you're working on all of this simultaneously. All of these projects right now are going on.
Yes.
And that's great.
Yeah. I mean, each one of them requires a lot of uh, thought and investment, but I have a limited attention span and also a certain bandwidth for endurance. And I feel like I run, when I see what I know needs to happen, I run to the end of that, and wait for the next thing. And sometimes the next thing is immediate and I can keep going. And other time it shifts, or something that I'm doing might connect to something in another place. And um, I'm, you know, I'm really blessed to be able to have a space where I can have more than one series or more than one project up on the wall at the same time. So I can kind of, move around from spot to spot, um, like a like a little insect in a flower in a field
A
of
field of flowers,
a
right?
field of flowers, and kind of work on them. But yeah, I would say I've got three different things on the front burner at the same time. It's like one of those pots that's subdivided, where you can cook three different things at the same time,
Right.
um, like a hot pot. Uh, yeah, and other things in shelves and in under other paintings and on hard drives and whatnot.
That's great. That's great. Before we get into the work that you sent, I'm curious to know, with this, the type of the way you work and going from one thing to the next, and this understanding of need to get work done, the how do you incorporate, your faith? Like how are you, like, on a, I don't know, day to day, week to week, month to month? How do you also incorporate your time in terms of your devotionals, or how do you incorporate all of that?
Hmm, that's a big question. So the first part, how do I incorporate faith? But the second part, um, how does devotion connect with my practice?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, because of the type of person that you are.
Because
Because
of the random like
no, I'm
quirky.
listening to you, and I work a lot like that too, and I haven't met a lot of people who do that. So I'm just curious, how do you keep that balance?
Oh, yeah. So for the second part of that question, like what does it look like to have a devotion? And by that, what I'm understanding from you is like a devotion where which is set like separate, reading or writing based.
Or just the practice of having, time to reflect, and, you know, creating that space in your day,
Mhm.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
great
So
learning.
yeah, I grew up in a tradition where I think devotion was very much functioned on one side of the brain. It was very much like you're reading, and then you're writing in response. And that is something that I treasure, and I think it's wonderful. And I wouldn't trade it away for anything else. But I realize also that it wasn't enough, and that devotion actually happens on a much broader scale, and devotion needs to happen in a way that integrates that with all of the other things. Like there's too much to meditate on.
Mm,
There's too much glory. There's too much to reflect on to just do it by reading and writing. Although that is core and elemental. I mean, if we can't read or write or sustain that as a practice, I think that's a detriment to us as creative individuals. But um, yeah, growing up in a family of creatives and musicians and artists, I just realized that there's a kind of meditation that happens visually that
hmm.
doesn't happen when I'm
Yeah.
just writing. And there's a kind of meditation and devotion that happens when you're making music or listening to music that also doesn't happen the other ways. They're all different uses of time. They're different ways of engaging like different senses. And ideally, we can be individuals and creatives where somehow all of those things come together. And we're also able to kind of shift gears between them.
Yep.
And I don't really know how to do that, but I feel
It
like
happens.
somehow that should be the way
Hmm.
that things go on. So, I mean, specifically for my practice, like if I'm in the studio, not doing other things, writing is a part of that. Writing is a really important way um, to kind of stand outside what I have been doing and just take notes on what I see going on in my work or in my studio, or notes about what I did yesterday or what I'm planning to do today, kind of to uh, Well, I mean, actually, more recently, it's something that I do at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you go into the studio, you start creating, you make work, and then at the end of the day, save 15 minutes of that kind of, what we learn as um in terms of Christian devotion, like reading and writing, reading and responding to it as an act of prayer.
Yes.
Um, I do a similar thing in my studio where I read the walls and I write down the facts of what I see, and then
Love it.
I reflect on it just very briefly. And I usually give thanks for it as well. Um, and so that's, I mean, that's a very small way of integrating devotion into the practice, but it's something that I've found has been helpful as a means to kind of shift gears, um, to see things clearly from different perspectives. And that's kind of my goal,
Yeah.
in some sense, to be able to see what I'm doing and the way I make my way through the world from many different angles and many different perspectives. And it's hopeless if it's all up to me. That's where community comes into it, to see the work and also to feed into it. Um, but that's, yeah, it's part of my hope is trying to
That's,
see things from a different way. And devotion is a great way to be able to do that.
that's
Get us
great.
outside of ourselves.
I think that's great. I mean, I love the fact it almost is, it's like a, the spiritual practice of an examen, like at the end of the day, being able to go and
Mhm.
read the wall. I love that. I think that's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. Hey, I want to make sure we have enough time. I want to go and look at some of the work that you've done.
Yep, sure.
Let me start here. Okay. Why don't you tell us about the pieces that we're going to be looking at, how you got your inspiration, and talk to us about what you've done here.
Okay. So Adrian, can I make a request
Sure.
about these? Um, I'll definitely I'll give a kind of a preface of where they've come from,
Mhm.
um, and a little bit about the trajectory, but they are unfinished, all of these drawings. They're in process. And so what I would love to do first, or after I give just a brief preface to them,
Okay.
what I would love is if you would just cycle through the five so that everybody gets a chance to see them.
Okay.
And then maybe for those who are on the call, I would just love like an initial response of what
Great.
you're seeing in the work. And then maybe um I can unpack that just a little bit. Would that work?
That would work very well. Yes.
Okay. I saw some of the other things and I noticed that the artists like talked through their work, but because this is a series,
Sure.
because it's not done, I would love everybody's participation in it as well.
It's great.
So what
So,
you're going to see are five unfinished drawings, and these are 5 out of 9 drawings. So you're not seeing um, the whole project or the whole scope or the whole series right now.
mhm.
But I chose a couple that I thought kind of represented some of the sequence.
Okay.
Um, they're charcoal on paper. Uh, they are 36 by 60 roughly. So 36 wide, 60 roughly high. And they take their start from um, a limestone relief carving that I saw in the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, which is in Boston, where I live. And uh, it was done in the 1500s, I think 1425. And it was commissioned by a couple uh, for their, I guess it was kind of their chapel, or I don't know if it's their private chapel or maybe a local chapel that they were patrons of. But it is a retable showing the last hours or the day preceding the crucifixion of Christ. So I saw this um, kind of religious artwork in the museum, and I was really taken by it. And this was probably some 2 or 3 years ago. It just stuck with me. Sometimes I don't know how you folks do museums, but sometimes I prime myself to go into a museum and just spend time with one painting or one work of art and just like you know try to open and tune myself to whatever that artwork, whatever it may be. And I usually don't choose beforehand. Sometimes I do. But in this case, I didn't. And this was the artwork that really struck me. And so I mean, it struck me so that I've been working on this series for 2 years, and it's still resonating. So that's kind of the preface for it.
Okay.
So you'll see five, and Adrian has put some working titles with each of the drawings. So maybe we can cycle through and look at each of them for, I don't know, whatever feels right
All
or
right.
comfortable, just for a little bit. And then as we come back around, then I'd love your response, and then maybe I can speak to it a little bit more.
All right, so this is Desert Voice. So each one will be titled, and so Convergence, if you could just jot down the title, and then when we come back around, um, would jot some notes down. I think it would be great to have a conversation about these. Garden Betrayal. Okay, I think that was the five of them. So we can go back to the first one. I'm curious. Oops. Let me see. How do I get back there? There we go. So, convergence. Now, I can't see everyone, but I really would love you to come off mute. And Adrian Johnston is asking us to share what we see. So, who would like to take and comment or speak about desert voice?
I love it. It's so dynamic. I think it's John the Baptist, and I see like the new dawn coming. I'm interpreting the skeleton as the end of the old, or the the beginning of the end of the old self, the before the crucifixion. I could be wrong, but I just feel in the like arc of his hand, imagine the different prophets, the whole history of the Old Testament and what's coming. I just love the composition, all of them, the composition, the sensitivity, they're all different. So
Thanks, Danielle.
Yeah, thank you, Danielle.
Anyone else?
So I'm curious, Adrian, I don't remember from looking at your site. Do you typically do religiously themed or religiously based work, or is this a kind of different for you?
Yeah, this is a little bit different than what I usually do. Um, it's it's very religious, in the sense that it had its kind of impetus in a religious artwork, like something that was specifically used for devotion. And I generally don't, I mean, I do a lot of, I love figurative work, which I work from the figure quite a bit. Not so much like this one that we're seeing, but I do love the figure as kind of a core emotive presence, or maybe sometimes absence in whatever I do. And I work on landscapes, abstracted landscapes as well. Um, but this seemed to me, I mean, I feel like in the time that we're in, kind of religion and religiosity seemed like such a potent and a difficult topic at large. And by that I mean like one that we don't quite know what to do with on the side of faith, and then on the, I would say on both sides, whether whether you would call yourself a believer or an unbeliever, a Christian or a non-Christian, or somebody of Judeo-Christian background or another religion. I mean, there's all this like um search for what like religion delivers to our lives, but also religion is kind of like blown up in the context of our country, especially right now. And so doing this was kind of a way to to kind of like address something that was very obvious and very difficult for me to think about how to present, but also in a way of just thinking about how to have conversations about these things. So it's kind of a new thing for me. I'm not a religious artist per se,
Yeah.
but I was so struck by that funny kind of, and I say funny, medieval French retablo, because it was this story representing these events from, like the land of Palestine so many years ago, but they were all dressed up in tights and pointed hats, like medieval trappings. And yet you see it again. And then here it is presented at Boston, in Boston, bequeathed by Mrs. Gardner to the city of Boston. And I thought, what do we do with this in the
Right.
21st century? Like, how do we even think about this? And there were so many questions that I thought were pertinent and relevant that I wanted to think about, like religion and the story and culture and how the story and the culture interact, and the idea of patronage and like financial patronage, but also spiritual patronage. Um, and then the flow of how the story was represented and how time was represented in the story.
Mm.
All these things, they just like, they really, um, yeah, really sparked something in me that made me want to do kind of not religious art, but art that could maybe invite us inside or maybe somehow keep us outside for
Mm.
a different reading,
Yeah.
in a sense.
Yeah, I think it's really, really interesting. And I don't even know what prompted me to ask that question, but you answered what was kind of like where that came from, because
Yeah.
I do think it's really interesting for you to be approaching these biblical themes, but not doing it as an act of devotion, not doing it for any of those purposes, and yet you are a person of faith. So that is part of how, you can see the processing there, which I think is really interesting and really new. And I'm kind of feeling like this could be a way of thinking about approaching art as a Christian in
Mhm.
the 21st century, because you do, like you said, you have this insider outsider perspective, which I think is because of all the layering and all the angles and all the images and everything layered on top of it. There's a permission there to enter into the story, as well as, like you said, culturally. um that I don't know I don't know how much I see that approach um, from Christians in the arts. And so your work is making me, those are things that I think a lot about. And so this is sparking me to ask some questions and to think about some other ways of doing things. So yeah, I think it's really fascinating. I love that there's so much darkness and so much light,
Mhm.
and that layering, that I do feel that like being invited in and pushed away at the same time. And I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and this, again, this is kind of my exploration and not so much um my invention, I guess. One, if you ever get a chance to, I should have shared a photo, but you can look it up on the Isabella Stewart Gardner website. One of the things that I was struck by in the relief carving was that above each of these little panels, which frame the kind of characters in the story, in the architecture, like the carved architecture above each, was a little window. And in each window, there's a little head popping through, and somebody with a book or a scroll, and the words are like spilling out of the window. And if you read about the intention behind that, it's kind of like these, it's to what the original workshop or the craftspeople who were making this carving were doing was they were connecting the events that they were portraying in the panel with the things written about those events hundreds and thousands of years before. So they were like heads of prophets popping
Wow.
through the wall of time, like pointing to what's going on. And I thought that was such an interesting idea. Like when the story was unfolding in real time, almost everybody didn't know what was going on. It was just chaos and confusion, even though these things had been written about earlier.
Mhm.
And so most of the characters in the story were outside of the story. There's only, actually one person in the story who actually knew what was going on. Um, and so, talking with a lot of friends and people I know about this piece or the story that it depicts, they're like, I have no idea how to relate to this. Like, I don't know what they were thinking in France in 1425. And, partly that's because, there's a lot of other things to think about in the 21st century. But partly it's because there is that kind of dynamic of this architectural wall that only sometimes, the window opens up and somebody pops through and
Mhm.
said, like, here's what's going on. Nobody knew at the time. We look back and we see certain things, but I think that's also how we live our own lives as well. It's we live in the first person. We don't always know what's going on or why until somebody else comes in and points us, or there's
Yeah.
a voice that says, this is why, or this is where, or gives us some kind of framework or perspective. And so, yeah, this project is a little bit about me stepping outside, but also me trying to dive deeply into the story and experience it and try to bring that out to people who might feel outside of the story,
Very,
no matter where they are in their level of like whatever Bible knowledge or their experience in a church community, or in their perception of what these things mean on a broader cultural scale, um, to kind of, to make that boundary um, a more of an ambiguous one, that perhaps it could function both ways. And I don't think I've gotten there. I don't think I've figured out a way to do that, but these drawings are a part of that process.
it's great. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on Desert Voice? Just take yourself off mute and speak.
I just want to say, now that I heard you speak, I really can see that. And even like taking time to look at the skeleton in a different way. I think if I weren't a religious person and I was looking at, I would feel a lot about what is my stand on things and how am I looking at potential destruction coming in the earth and how we're dealing with these things. So I think it is like, and as someone who has faith, it just invites me in a different way into the here and now.
Very good. All right. Okay. Gonna go to Garden Betrayal. What do you see?
I'd like to make a comment. Adrian, I think your paintings are just so inviting, as Lisa mentioned, to go deeper. You mentioned that when you go to museums, you don't want to necessarily see everything, but you focus in on one painting and try to get the depth and all that that painting would have for you. And I think you're doing that and more with your paintings. And this one is especially packed with so much meaning that pops out at you as you look at different parts of the painting that aren't initially drawing your attention, like the corners and the little things embedded in all over the painting. And so this is the type of painting I would want to spend a half an hour at a minimum if I was with someone else, and if I was by myself, more. So thank you for that. It's packing all the story and all the facets of meaning into one story is was such how you're able to tie it together. So thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Anyone else? I think it's pretty powerful. Adrian, would you like to speak on this one?
Sure. I think this one is actually one of the more complete drawings. And I was very interested in the carving of, there's all these things going on at the same time in the panel that depict this this scene. So it's Christ in the garden and Judas is kissing him. At the same time, he's being arrested by the guards, and then Peter is cut off the ear of one of the guards, and the healing of that ear is also taking place at the same time.
Wow.
And so it's like, you know, how much can you carve into like whatever, like 5 inches by 10 inches of limestone. And I was really interested to explore all of that in charcoal on a much bigger scale. But the thing I was really that I found that maybe I can note was I was very interested that all of the things going on, like Steve said, I think are really meaningful. But it was very as I was thinking through it, you know, trying to figure out like how do you draw something like the healing of an ear? I think it just says like he touched his ear and it was healed. And so I'm just thinking about this guy having his ear cut off with a sword, and what actually happened. You know, did the ear fall to the ground? Like, did somebody have to pick it up? Did he fall down? You know, what was going on? And so I'm imagining this just like a kind of like a just so much chaos.
Yeah.
And I didn't actually know what to do with it. Except when I figured out, you know, maybe the more important thing about the story is not the healing that Jesus is healing Malchus's ear, but if you can see the hand, he's holding the ear and he's offering it to the viewer instead. There are several hands, you know, some are reaching out to Malchus, but I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if he was giving this ear back to whoever was standing there as a gift? Like, has anybody cut your ear off? Here you go, giving it back to you. And that kind of an interaction, or that kind of a personalizing of what could go on in a story, and what could perhaps happen, you know, as you work on a painting. You know, you discover these layers of meaning and significance as you kind of relearn and reread the story visually. I guess this connects a little bit to what I was saying about like a visual meditation.
Right. Yes. Okay, I'm gonna go because I want to make sure we get through. Son and mother.
I really just enjoyed the journey of the line from Mary in the forefront up to the back of the painting, which I thought I was seeing. Oh, that's so interesting.
Mhm.
Before I thought I was kind of seeing the
The three
yeah,
crosses.
seeing the cross in the
Yeah.
background. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But then off to the left, the people, the cloud of witnesses, I'm not sure, that group of people with the light. Um, yeah, all of these are extremely intriguing.
Mm-hmm.
I had actually started with those like the hill in the back as being the scene, and then the characters in the foreground, the son and the mother, I thought they need to be much closer. So it actually ended up that if you can see the bar on the right hand side, that goes down about halfway, like that's actually what I was thinking of as the cross. And so as you'll see on the next one, which is the next image sequentially, you'll see the bar on the left side. So you basically, you don't see the full cross at all.
Oh, okay.
But you just see those who are at the foot.
Ah,
So you have kind of two sides.
wow. I'm going to go back to it just a quick second. Okay. Yeah. Comments on mockers? All right, I'm going to take us to the next one because I want to see everybody's face before we... First witnesses. Any comments? Convergence?
I have a question. The images that you put in the paintings are very realistic, but there's something about your style that reminds me of like the abstract world of depicting things, and I don't know why.
Mhm.
But would you think that you've been influenced by what traditions or what genres in your expression?
Yeah. I've been influenced by a lot of, I would say probably three different kind of groups uh, or kind of like schools of imagery. I definitely grew up looking at classical works of art, like the um, the the medieval, the Renaissance, um, European uh, whole thing, body of work. I was very influenced also from a very young age, but also in my experience by Eastern, like especially Chinese literati painting, like landscape painting, um, and the way that visual weight and kind of time was dealt with in those ink paintings. But I've also spent a lot of time looking at both modern and contemporary art, and really trying to understand, um, you know, how uh, how our human experience, personal experience, and communal experience in the 20 and 21st century um, is evoked on the visual scale through visual meaning. And I would say that that's the whole gamut from things that have influenced me from modern and contemporary painting, installation, time-based work, as well as yeah, I mean a whole slew of different kinds of things. And so I generally like with this with charcoal, I did integrate some of the more classical um, way of rendering things, and also in terms of abstraction. I think abstraction is incredibly emotive and incredibly carries um, meaning and kind of an experience or sense of time that is really, really potent and interesting. And so I've brought, I guess, out of that, my storehouse of what I look at. But as these kind of like large verticals, they are reminiscent in some way of kind of like ink painting. They're charcoal, but they do have a little bit of that aesthetic. And I mean, this one is not finished. It's not a finished drawing. It's already progressed from the time that I sent this to Adrian. But yeah, there's a lot to do with kind of like horizonlessness, things happening all over the place, places of busyness, places of rest, light and
Well,
heavy. So
well,
yeah.
thank you for sharing the explanation of what I'm looking at, because I'm more on the writing side. So
Mhm.
I've taken lessons from your art today and your explanation for how to integrate, approaches that might draw from different philosophical ages. And
Mhm.
what a rich expression you've really given us. I could see all of it. I mean, sometimes I think, wow, is this rendering? Should this be in Notre Dame? And that kind of thing. You can see that. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Steve. I don't know if it should be in Notre Dame, but if you have any ideas of where it should be, I'm open. I'm still thinking about that. They're just they live on paper for the moment, and I think they still have further to go in terms of thinking how they might be presented, how they could bring um, both people who maybe don't know the story or don't
Yes.
trust the story, and people who know it and might want to see it in a different way. I don't know. So I'm still thinking about all that.
Wow. Wow. Well, you know what? This really, we usually have time when we can ask questions. If there's anyone who has a question before we go, I want to just open it up right now, but I want to be it's already 6 o'clock, so we won't do it long. But does anyone have a question for Adrian before we go? This has just been so rich, Adrian. Really want to thank you. Anyone?
Yeah.
was-
Thank you.
Great. Steven, is it? Smith?
yeah. I was wondering if you could talk about your lament series.
Sure. We can't see them. Do you have a specific question about them? Like where
Yeah,
they,
well,
I mean, there's a little description on the website there.
oh, okay. Well, maybe I should go back and read the description. Sorry. No, I guess I was just wondering, and maybe this is in the description, but like what precipitated those, and if they were responding to something, and if you had like a process, because like biblical laments have kind of a process to them, and I didn't know if you were somehow putting that into the something like that into the the visual aspect of it, or I don't know. I was just curious about all that.
Yeah. I would say yes to that. Um, I was really, I mean, it intrigued me that lament was a language that from what I knew about it, it was primarily written or musical art form. And it was a way that people could find some kind of a container to put a whole range of like completely discombobulated feelings and emotions and experiences. And if you read laments, they're extremely like they're structured, but they're kind of off kilter, and they are a bit chaotic. And I was just interested that lament could be a language that anybody could. I mean, for this sounds kind of like sounds unfortunate, but like it's a language that everybody in some sense, no matter what tradition or background you're from, you can participate in a lament, or unfortunately, we live through circumstances which kind of necessitate a container for feelings and emotions that we don't really know what to do with. And I was thinking, could that work also in a visual format? And so I did these 5 paintings that were each, they start with the word how, which is kind of the in Arabic, I think it's Rita, in Hebrew, it's Aicha, like how something. Like in Lamentations in the Old Testament, it's like how the gold has lost its luster. It's just like a statement, like everything's wrong. How the gold has lost its luster. And so each of the 5 are titled how something, like how fragile, how many, how long, that kind of thing. And so they were ways to meditate on things that different people were lamenting, different losses that people were experiencing, and kind of collapsing those experiences on a visual, just on a canvas or on a panel. And it ended up being kind of a weaving process. How do you bring all these things together? And so I came up with these 5 abstract compositions that were rooted kind of in the 5 chapters of Lamentations, but also had a lot of connection to things that, my own experiences or people around me, things that I knew people were thinking about or struggling with or lamenting at the time that I was working on them.
Wow. Adrian, thank you so much for taking this time out and visiting and speaking with us and sharing your beautiful work. And I look forward to meeting up sometime in the future.
Sure. My
So,
my studio is as you know, in Lawrence. So if you'd ever
yes,
interested in a studio visit, I'd
yes,
be happy
we're
to-
in Connecticut. We're in Connecticut. So, yes, definitely. So we will be in touch. Okay.
Great. Thank
Convert.
you. Yeah, thank you to everybody who asked questions, and you've all now contributed to Works in Process. So whatever happens next, um, in the drawings and wherever they go, I really appreciate your feedback, and I take everything that you've shared and put into it very seriously, and continue to weave your thoughts and participation into those drawings. So maybe you'll see them someday in the future
Yeah.
and know that you're a part of them somehow.
It's all about community, right?
Yeah.
This is great. Well, God bless you. Thank you so much. And Convergence, thank you for coming out and participating. So, Lord be with you.
Thank you.
God bless.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Adrian.
Yep.